So yeah, now I'll discuss and then you can. So here we are now with the treadmill, very common machine. Without this, probably a gym won't exist. So how does this work? Most people will know there's a uh, sort of motor that makes the whole thing run, and then the whole sort of program starts, and then he will start moving along with it. Okay, so let's press start, Varun, and then let's get it started. So this has very similar system, just like how we have in the cross trainer. Not exactly the same, but the console can be slightly different. Most machines, like I've said, will have different consoles. So here it has the main two to remember is the one for increasing resistance. Okay, and sometimes, in this case, in a treadmill, you will have the one which increases the incline as well. Okay, so just to show you from a resistance, first we'll show the resistance one. So let's make this faster. So as you can say, he's walking now. We'll make it go faster and faster and faster, and the screen will show. So we'll go up to maybe 7.2 and up to around 8. As you can see, his running pattern will change. Okay. And if you see how it moves, we'll go up to 12. Will that be okay? Okay. Just to see, there you go. So now till 12, you can see how much his knee travels as well. Okay. And how his running pattern is. And then let's go back again down slow. Now, a lot of treadmills will have speed up to around 16. Some will have 18. Okay. So now you can say his knee will travel slightly lesser forward, and then go. And we start walking. Okay. So we'll just have an easy walk here, maybe at level 4.8. So speed can be increased. We know that, right? How much is the speed required is up to us. Okay, how much we want to make it fast. Now, what's the other thing that can be done to make this fast, or rather make this harder? One is speed. The other parameter is incline. So as you can see now, even at this speed, it can become very hard as I press the incline button, and as you can see, the machine slowly going up, 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 up. Now, one of the things here, you notice what happens with his body. Check the lean and also check the ankle. Okay, as he lands now, his ankle, the angle at the ankle, okay, he'll get more and more into dorsiflexion. Okay, and this can have an impact on how. Do let me know if it's too hard, and you can do hold here. Okay, yeah. So now he's at incline 20. Can you just walk for maybe just a few minutes now without holding? Now, one difference, not holding is where he's actually working harder, and the way he's moving. Now hold and walk. Now, a lot of people make this mistake. They hold and it just takes the whole impact out. There's no point if you hold and walk. So sometimes this is a common thing which you'll see in a lot of regular gyms. A lot of people will just get onto the machine, hold, and then they keep walking. Now, why do they do this? They do this because the calories burned will be shown more by the machine. Okay, but the moment they hold, this you can think of it like this. Think Varun's right now climbing up on sort of an uphill thing, which is hard. But this is almost like somebody's holding his hands and he's dragging them up. Okay, he's giving their hands and is walking. Okay, in real life. Now, obviously, that's much easier than there's being nobody and you walking. So again, if you take your hands off Varun, you can just see how hard it is. Now, obviously, if he has to try to run at this speed, it's extremely hard and we wouldn't try. But this is something to understand. If you use incline, don't hold this. The only time you should be holding at the sides, the only reason for holding would be to check your heart rate. If you want to check it with the sensors here, okay, or there's absolutely no reason to hold a treadmill on the sides, because always think of this as something where you do this for the sake of getting fitter, how you would on the street. When you run on a street, you're doing a marathon, or even an athlete who's running 400 meters, do they have something to hold on the side? Can they rest, or can they rest like this and do it? If they can't do it, then there's no point doing this with those same sort of actions just because this allows. So make sure you don't lean onto this, don't hold this really. The only reason is maybe again for people who are beginners, who find it hard, who don't have that sort of confidence to let the flow move behind them. Okay. Now, what do I mean by the flow moves behind them? What is the difference between a treadmill and running on the street or running on a track? Now, if you notice what's happening under his feet, obviously the flow moves behind him, like I said, right? So the whole track is moving back. What would happen if Varun had to say now walk for, if it's covered a distance of around half a kilometer? If he did this outside, what would be the difference? He would have traveled from point A to point B. He would be in a different place from where he started. Does that happen on this? Answer is no, because he's in the same place where he started, and is in the same place even after 20 minutes he's going to be here. So some of these things about treadmills you have to understand, that as effective as they are, and they are good and they have a role, especially when you're looking at keeping base endurance for an athlete off season or just building up and so on and so forth, they have a role, but they have a limitation. This is not the same as running 10 kilometers outside. And why is it not? One, I've explained, right, down. Second, why is it not? Because of the fact that there's no wind. Okay, there's no sort of wind either from behind or from front. And sometimes in athletics, there's these races which are called, wind assisted records or wind assisted times. So what is that? It basically, they take into account that there was wind which helped the body move in a certain direction, or there was wind against. Okay. Now in a gym, you don't get that. So yes, this is great to move. This has its own plus points, that you can use this when it's raining outside, when it's snowing outside, okay, when the weather is extremely hot, maybe at different times of the day. So treadmill has a huge role. It has a plus, but like I always say, it's like a medicine. You need to know exactly how much of that medicine you want to use, and you need to know how much of it is maybe not worth. Okay. Now for an athlete, like I've said, this can work great, if they are traveling for competition and they want to use this just to have something light, just to feel active in the morning before maybe their main matches or something. Nothing wrong if they are used to this. Okay. But things to keep in mind is that, you have to make sure that it's a good treadmill. One of the problems that can happen with treadmills in commercial setups, okay, which are probably old or which have not been serviced, or which are possibly maybe not of the best quality, the suspension can be a bit different. And what do I mean by that? It means that the suspension can get a bit hard, and that itself can be a problem. Sometimes the track, the way it moves, can be a bit different, and people who run regularly, they would know. Okay, so we have to keep these things in mind, that you want to run on a good treadmill. Running on a good treadmill has the difference and the advantage over road running by the fact that the impact is less. If it's a well-designed treadmill, if it's a good quality one. A treadmill which has maybe some uneven path, where part of it, some parts are worn out, that can cause a bit of an issue for a lot of runners. Now for an athlete, okay, I've explained, one, that the flow is moving under you. So you're in the same place where you started. So that's obviously a disadvantage, because every athlete, when they move, they need to move from point A to point B and C and so on and so forth, right? Football player just doesn't stay in the same place and pass the ball. So when it comes to propulsion, okay, a treadmill won't teach that to an athlete, because there's no propulsion, because the flow is moving back. So the muscles which aid in propulsion, your gluteus maximus, the hamstrings, when they help you to push forward, even your quadriceps, to work to push you from point A to point B, those muscles don't work as efficiently here. Okay. So there are some drawbacks like that. What is the major drawback though? And when I say a drawback, I'm talking about, what if say Varun's an athlete and I want to make him improve his stamina and make it, if he's a badminton player, as a sport in badminton, how does one move on court? I would want you to think about this. Okay, does he move in a straight line? Does the flow move under him? Answer is no, right? So when it comes to a treadmill, one of the drawbacks of this is that there's no lateral movement that is possible. One, okay, you just can't move. He can't now suddenly take a step to the left and right and come back. He can do that on the floor. Okay, so that becomes a lot more specific if you're working on creating movement patterns which are more efficient laterally. He can do that down. Can he do it on this? Answer is no. Okay, he cannot do this. What is one more thing that cannot be done on a treadmill? Deceleration. If now Varun builds up a speed, okay, and let me do this, let me show you. Okay, I'll just build up a speed for him now which goes up to around 12 again. Are you okay to run at 12? So now his built up speed, okay. And now let's assume he was in a sport where he's running and there's a football there and he has to stop. How does he practice that on a treadmill? I'm pressing down. How long does it take for him to slow down? Okay. So this is the time. It took him almost 4 seconds to go tuck, 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 and so on and so forth, slow down. On a real field, sports like football, sports like badminton, where there's a net and you go in fast and you have to stop. Okay, you don't have time. You have to stop in a split second. You hit a smash, you move to the net. So now talking about the lateral movement. Okay, obviously a lateral movement is not possible on this. Deceleration immediately is also not possible in this. And these two become one of the most important things of sport, right? That you want to decelerate suddenly and you want to change direction. And when we define agility, what is it? It's literally that. You want to accelerate, decelerate, stabilize, change direction. And all these things are not possible on a treadmill. You can't accelerate suddenly, you can't decelerate suddenly, and you can't change direction. And this becomes the difference. That's why you'll notice somebody who just does pure treadmill running. You find somebody who runs in a gym is very good maybe to run for probably 20 minutes. Very impressive. You put them on a track with some athletes or maybe footballers, maybe tennis players, badminton players, maybe even table tennis players. And that person who only does treadmill running won't have those qualities of deceleration and acceleration at a high pace. Okay, so these are some of those things to remember. Okay, that treadmills have a plus, that they're safe, they're in an enclosed environment, you can use them, but you need to know that there are some limitations for athletes. Okay? So you can use this for your athletes, you can use this for general weight loss, it helps quite a lot. Okay, but this is like, if I give an example, sometimes I say there's a role for this. When you don't have access to go out, this is a fair enough exercise to be done. But an example would be like, when you see a mouse which is on a flywheel in a cage, okay, the mouse moves, and which is good because it has activity, the limbs move, but the mouse is in the same place. Versus if we take a mouse which is out in the jungle, so that mouse will move and will have all its senses and its multi-directional abilities as well. So this is just to give a rough example and a sort of analogy how a treadmill versus ground running works. So this is not the same as running on a ground. This is not the same as doing drills which are possible outside. Okay, so we need to know this. From a safety point of view, something you'll notice when people do this, as they get tired, they start going back. There are cases where people fall off this. Okay, so you have to be careful of your athletes. Make sure when they do this, tell them to just check that their hands are generally here. A tip sort of I would give is, as you walk, occasionally just let your hand touch to the side. Okay, just once in a while. Make it a habit to just touch after maybe every 1 minute. So you know that you're in the safe range. Okay, you don't want to go too far back, fall, and just have an unnecessary sort of injury. Things to notice. So one point now to remember. Okay, we've spoken about safety, not to go too far back, to be safe here. Okay, don't be on your phones while using this. Okay, you don't want to sort of lose track. If you want to use the phone, make sure you're not running at your fastest. You keep the phone around here and watch. Now, one thing to remember with this is that sometimes, okay, in some cases, if the electricity goes off, the machine can stop suddenly. Now, some treadmills, which are again from maybe top manufacturers, they have this sort of 10-second slowing down kind of a feature, where the machine, even if the light goes off, it will slow. It will give you 10 seconds to stop. Otherwise, if you are running at a high speed, let's say now Varun was running at 12, and suddenly light goes off, the machine just stops. This can be, of course, tricky. So these are things now you have to be cautious of while working with athletes. Imagine if you're taking some players, on some tour, and they're in some place where the treadmills are not maybe the best location. What would happen if you played everything perfectly done, and then you end up reaching there, and then last moment an accident happens because they got excited, they thought, let me run, light goes off, they fall, hit their head here, they're injured and they can't take part, all the work is gone. So these are things to keep in mind, and always, like I say, just according to the medical sort of way of looking at it, is do no harm, safety first. Okay, before anything, safety first and do no harm. It's okay not to improve, but it's worse to go behind from a training perspective. So yes, safety wise, remember, if the machine stops, it can sort of cause problems. So be aware of this. Okay, generally when your athlete is doing this, and if they are running, and if they are not used to this, be around them. Okay, don't expect them to know how a treadmill is used. And any equipment in the gym, any and every equipment, we have to realize that these are machines. And just like any machine, like a car, like a motorcycle, or like any other machine, can cause harm to a human body which is made up of flesh and bones, this can also cause harm. So don't think of this as a toy. Don't let the athletes think of this as a toy or a club where they come to have fun. The gym is a serious place. You train, you go. You are dealing with a lot of machines, and some of these machines can cause a lot of problems if used inappropriately, just like a car or a motorcycle. So keep the safety points in mind, and hope this has helped you understand how this works. Now, of course, there are various other equipment that can be used, such as doing the rowing machine. There are machines which can be used for other things. You sometimes have what's called the arm bike, where you sit and use your arm. So there are various machines. Like I said, there's no universal sort of rule that a treadmill has to be like this or any other machine has to. So tomorrow we can find some new company come out with something else. Okay, we need to know how anatomy is and how we want to use and what do we want to use it for. Okay. Now, when it comes to doing drills on the ground outside with your athletes, what is another difference? That outside you can have a whole team running. How many treadmills can you have in a gym? So these are things which are sort of the ground reality. So make sure that when you do your runs, when you do your training outside for cardiovascular, you know exactly what you're doing. Now, when it comes to ground running or running on courts, the advantage there and what you should know is that you can manipulate time, okay? You can manipulate the distance, and you can train large groups. In a gym, there's a drawback of training an athlete on this. One, like I've mentioned all the other points, but you just can't train too many athletes. Okay? So you have to understand that on the ground, you can use various techniques, and there's enough info out there, how to use the high intensity interval training method, or if you're doing long duration, low intensity, and what do you want to gain out of it. So that is where a strength and conditioning coach knows about programming. Okay. And of course, in this course, as an online course, it is way beyond the scope of, explaining all the routines out there. But hopefully this gives you a base idea of how to use a machine, how to stay safe, how to use the heart rate, what is there to expect in a gym. Okay. So make sure you design safe routines. Make sure your athletes stay safe. When the program is over, they still feel safe and they should be better. Okay. Make sure you understand what can be done in a gym and what cannot. Okay. This is technology if we talk about it. And one thing I would like to now talk about is, Varun, if you can slowly step off by keeping this on. Just step off and come down. Yeah. And now he's here, right? Now the time is showing 5.1. Okay. And now you stay out. Okay. Make sure you don't step on. Now here, let's just make it fast. Okay, don't step on that. Now the calories are showing, it's now 24 calories so far, 25, 26, so it's at 17, 18. Now this treadmill obviously goes pretty fast. Wow, this actually is a good one. It goes up to 20, 22. Now this is the max speed. Calories are going real fast. Okay. Now maybe you want to step off carefully. Now let's go to incline as well. Okay, I'm just going to take it to its max. So you can see the inclines up. Okay. And just imagine there's a person running at this speed, at 22 speed, at this incline. Okay, and now in that sport you want them to say stop, and I'll press stop. Okay, how long has it taken to stop this machine now? Maybe 5 seconds, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so almost 20 seconds to slow down. Now, of course, in a sport which is like maybe athletics, where it's 100 meters sprint, they do explode, and then they have to sort of take some time to slow down. Okay, and in some cases you'll notice in these stadiums they'll even have, if it's an indoor one, there'll be maybe like a mat where they go in and they can sort of absorb the shock onto that. Okay, point what I wanted to make is that the machine doesn't know if there's a human or not, and the machine takes time to slow down. A human in sport wants to start, stop, change direction. Okay, if your sport is like that. If it's a sport like athletics, you might say, okay, it does help in athletics because you do go fast. Yes, it does help to that extent, but at the same time, the flow is moving under you. Athletics, you go from point A to point B, whereas on a machine, you're on point A throughout, no matter, even if you run at 22 kilometers speed. Okay, so these are things to remember. Hopefully this should help you create better programs with cardiovascular endurance and knowing exactly how to use it to the best of your abilities and to make your athletes perform better. Thanks.